Thank you for participating in the 10th Annual BlackStar Film Festival. We would like to thank our funders and individual donors, as well as our network of producing and community partners. This panel, Mental Health and Filmmaking, is co-presented by American Documentary POV, PBS, the Scattergood Foundation, and World Channel. The runtime for this panel is 60 minutes, including audience Q&A, so please leave your questions in the comments and we'll do our best to engage with them. Please follow us on all social media platforms at BlackStarFest and use the hashtags BSFF21 and BlackStar10. Don't forget to fill out our audience evaluation and vote for your favorite films. We hope you have a wonderful time during the 2021 BlackStar Film Festival.
Welcome to the 10th Annual BlackStar Film Festival. I'm Nihat Khader, the festival director, and I'm truly delighted to introduce our moderator for this very important session. Yolo Akili Robinson is a writer, yoga teacher, and the executive director and founder of BEAM, the Black Emotional and Mental Health Collective, whose mission is to remove the barriers that Black people experience getting access to or staying connected with emotional care and healing. For over 15 years, Yolo has been on the forefront of progressive wellness work, beginning his career supporting Black communities as an HIV/AIDS counselor, then branching into violence prevention as a family intervention counselor. Robinson co-founded Sweet Tea, Southern Queer Men's Collective, a collective of gay and queer men who come together to address sexism and misogyny in LGBT communities. He's also written and been featured in numerous publications, most recently being a contributor to the New York Times best-selling anthology, You Are Your Best Thing, edited by Dr. Brené Brown and Tarana Burke. At the core of Yolo's work is a commitment to wellness informed by social justice, being attuned to a practical embodiment of theory and how community-based systems of care must integrate into current practices in Black life and build upon current traditions and norms in Black communities. It is such a pleasure to have you in conversation with us, Yolo, and I will turn the panel over to you.
Want me now? All righty. Technical challenges, you all. You know how it is in this day and age. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome, welcome. I'm so excited to have the opportunity to hold this space on this important conversation of the intersection of mental health and filmmaking with many esteemed guests. We're looking forward to a really robust, honest, layered discussion today. And so thank you for taking time out of your space, out of your time, of your day to join us today for this conversation. I'm going to start off our conversation by introducing our panelists and telling you a little bit about them. I'm sure many of them you are very familiar with. And then we're going to talk a little bit, give a little grounding about how we're going to be approaching the mental health, because if you're familiar with many of the filmmakers here or my work, you know this ain't going to be in your colonial white conversation about mental health, right? So we're going to have a little bit of a different discussion today. So we'll do that, and then we'll get into our discussion. So that being said, I'm going to first start by just introducing everyone we have here today. So leading off, and I'm going to apologize once again if I pronounce anything correctly. I am all about speaking correctly and being corrected, calling folks by their accurate name, the way it should be said. So please do not feel any apprehension to correct me at any different time. I will accept that willingly and openly. Okay. So first off, we have Jessica Généus, who started her acting career at 17 before studying cinema production years later. Her first big project as a director was Visage Nu, if I'm saying that correctly, a series of portrait.
Yeah.
Visage Nu?
Visage Nu, our faces.
Visage Nu. Visage Nu. Our faces. Thank you.
Really bad.
No, you. Which was to document the work and accomplishments of personalities that had a positive impact on society in Haiti. Now, this one, which means the sun will rise, I'm going to try it. Duvan Ju Kaleve, is that, can you tell me how to say that? Did I do it good? Thank you. Which means the sun will rise is the first long documentary and was awarded 8 awards in various film festivals. Frida, her first fiction, was selected as Un Certain Regard at the 2021 Cannes Film Festival and received the Prix François Chalet de la Découverte and is set to be released in France on October 13th. I hope I didn't butcher that too much. Welcome everyone to Jessica. Thank you for being here so much.
Thank you. I'm happy, and you did a great job. It's okay.
Thank you. I appreciate you entertaining my poor French and Creole.
Well, we are all so that matters.
Next, we have Lyric Cabral. Lyric, welcome. Lyric is an artist and nonfiction filmmaker based in Los Angeles. Their editorial debate, T-Terror, received an Emmy for Outstanding Investigative Documentary and is now streaming on Netflix. Lyric's films have appeared on PBS, BBC, and Viceland, among others. Lyric also is a photographer whose images reside in select collections like New Orleans Museum of Art, Studio Museum of Harlem, and the Gordon Parks Foundation. Everyone welcome Lyric, who is also on the West Coast with me. Welcome, Lyric. Next, we have Michèle Stephenson. Michèle is a director, filmmaker, artist, and author. Pulls from her Panamanian and Haitian roots to think radically about storytelling and disrupting the imaginary in nonfiction spaces. She tells compelling, deeply personal stories that are created by and for communities of color that reimagine and provoke. We love some provocation. Her achievements include 3 Emmy nominations, a Jury Prize and Tribeca Jury Award for Best Immersive Narrative. Stephenson is a Guggenheim Fellow and a Creative Capital Artist. Welcome so much, Michèle. Nice to have you here.
Hi.
And last but certainly not least, we have Nicole Naone. Nicole is an award-winning artist and activist and a longtime creative partner of Christopher Kahunahana. And let me know if I've said that right, Nicole. Yeah, I did right? Okay. Nicole is also one of the producers of the award-winning film Akili. She has her own show internationally and has held speaking engagements on behalf of the University of Hawaii as an alumni expert of its arts and culture program. The current iteration of her activism will appear as a 360 site-specific installation at the Honolulu Museum of Art, exploring various notions of sacredness in regard to Manaki. Is that right? Mauna Kea. So try. Thank you for the correction. Everyone, welcome everyone here to our conversation. Yay, we are all present and in the space. So we have a lot of brilliance in the space. I just want to say, as I was reading and reviewing and creating, culturating your bios, I was like, wow, all the brilliance and insight from different parts of the world and different communities. So I'm really excited to dive into this conversation. So as I promised everyone, I just want to give this preamble for anybody who's coming into the space. This is a conversation about mental health and filmmaking, but however, as we hold this conversation, we're very clear. And when I met with our panelists, we talked a little bit about how we're going to be intentional about how we're going to frame this discourse. We're recognizing that mental health as a framework is one that really comes out of colonial whiteness and assumes a lot of different things about psychology, wellness, spirituality, that many of our filmmakers and creators and myself don't assume. And so we will be interrogating some of those questions and ideas about what is mental health, even as we carry into our discussion. So that being said, let's just jump into our first question. As I said, so mental health is this concept that comes out of the West and white culture, but I'm curious to know from the panelists who would like to address this question. How does your work, you think, specifically speak to the different ways in which your communities, whether it's Indigenous folks, whether it's different communities of color, how does your work speak to the different ways in which different communities relate to mental, psychological, spiritual well-being that are counter to, or maybe just exist in different spaces than the dominant mental health framework? So I could choose someone, but I would love to, if you all want to open up and, I'm open to that.
No, I think I want to say we, but I think I'm thinking, and about what you say and the relationship. If everybody allows me to start, the relationship with this world, mental health, that has been a very huge challenge, heavier than I thought. Especially when I started to work on it and explore it, and crossing from the fear to needing to understand what it was and understand why it's called like that and what is beyond that term, you know. And what I would say, just to start, because I'm still thinking, is I remember as I was talking to my mother, which is part of the film also, I couldn't understand who decided that she had mental health issue, because she's probably one of the most brilliant person that I had to talk to. And I said to myself, is it because you understand too much that you've been classified as that? Or, what's the idea behind it? Is it because you're not useful to a society that has never given anything to you, that everybody decide that? So what is it behind that, but behind that term, behind that necessity to name things that way? So since I'm thinking still, I'm just gonna let anyone that wants to jump in. Yeah.
I mean, I don't speak on behalf of the entire Hawaiian community, but just on behalf of our film and the that notion of mental health being a colonized term in and of itself. It's definitely something that gets touched on within Waikiki, and it's tricky for people to necessarily understand specifically that it's not a comment on mental health. We actually didn't even realize how many things would be considered mentally unhealthy, that essentially are just a part of our everyday indigenous space. For example, Christopher Kuhunahana, our director, has so many conversations in spaces that would not be considered mentally healthy by the West, whether that's having a conversation with a specific wind, or having a conversation audibly or not with a specific stone. When you put that in the lens of a Western space, I mean, it's absolutely crazy, right? And the film for us deals a lot with even the idea of separating mental and spiritual and physical. Like that already is sort of an odd concept to separate those things as if they're not completely connected. So yeah, I love that you had acknowledged that from the get, that that the term in and of itself is already, there's some decolonizing that can happen before even diving.
I love what you were sharing. I love to hear from other folks, and I love that we're starting here, because when we think about the concept of mental health, just to interject this piece, is that it really comes out of folks in the West attempt to name and pathologize often different ways of cognitive, emotional showing up in the world, right? And that pathology often being driven by capitalism, right? You're not able to produce in a certain kind of way, so now you are othered, and this is less than or not desirable. And so seeing how that, particularly for communities of color, is often used against us, and often shows up even to this day into concept of mental health is important. And I love, Nicole, what you lifted up about the piece about the division, right? That mental health is like separate, or that our body is considered separate from our mind, from our spirit. These are things that in many communities across the world are not considered to be not the framework that is used, right? And so there's ways in which your work and the films and the art that you're creating speaks to that, and often can be confusing or not clear to a mental health lens if you're coming in with that colonized view, Michèle, I thought I saw you looking like you were going to say something.
Yeah, I just want to add a little bit of something, because the strange thing about it, as well as you were framing it, is part of what we're dealing with, and that is pathologizing, is the actual violence of racial capitalism and how we react to it. And so it's our reaction and the effect, the intergenerational trauma, what we're dealing with is the cause. I mean, the cause is racial capitalism, right? That's also kind of at the same time using this other lens to say that you are pathological, right? Or that you're not correct, but you have caused the incorrectness. I mean, racial capitalism has caused it, right? And so it's, again, this system, it's like this, it becomes this industrial complex, right, in some ways. So and I think for me, the big thing is how am I not transferring, and how am I transforming, right? What has been internalized, and filmmaking is actually part of that therapy. So yeah, just to connect also on a very personal level, I've dealt with, family, very close family members with these categorizations of schizoaffective disorder and all these kinds of things, and growing up in that environment, and being able to unpack that and understand the impact that the systemic has on our personal lives, and then we're pathologized because of it. It's a circle that's difficult to get out of.
Absolutely. Brilliantly
That's
said. I'm sorry.
No, I was just about to say that I love that so much. The fact that sometimes, or not sometimes, most of the time, analyzing a situation in the present without even considering what led us to that place today. And let's talk about Haiti, for example, a whole population that had to rebuild themselves on the land that they were tortured, that they were, that they had to bury, their ancestors because they were killed and destroyed. And on the same land, you have to rebuild yourself as a human being. And we talk about land, but sometimes it's sometimes it's the family. So within, that space of I'm not saying violence, but exactly happened. And you have to rebuild yourself. And this is definitely not something that anybody can just jump in and say, because it's always the question, why is Haiti still like that? I'm saying about Haiti because actually I'm here in Haiti right now, but can be in it. So why didn't you get over it? How do you do that? I am in this place of suffering. I am constantly bombarded by the same people that caused this place of suffering, that created this space of suffering. And you're surprised that I'm taking the time that is needed to heal from that. Like you don't even have the space to even heal. It's everything is going so fast. Everything is, constantly solicited. Everybody wants something from you constantly. And then you wake up one day, you're just old. Like you just see your life go through like that. I just wanted to jump on what Michèle was saying about the fact that to think about the what's happening right now without even considering all that has been done for us to be there today in that position, in whatever name you want to give that position, and yeah. Anyway,
I love that you bring that up too, because that's such a when you get into land acknowledgement and space acknowledgement and time acknowledgement is so something that I think is super relevant to this conversation. With we're indigenous, Chris and I are indigenous Hawaiians, right? And so we're not even in a space of people asking, like how you're giving an example of Haiti, why is there so much suffering? We are still in the gaslight zone of this very infantile baby country, America, who's only existed for like 20 minutes on the scheme of things versus like my ancestors have been here for millennia. Like we're still in a space of being told nothing's wrong. We're lucky that we're occupied, and the majority of the population like happily swallowing that and like making labor for the colonizers. We're like, what? So I think that element as well is something to even be able to, especially in art, recognize what time slot you're in and know that like you're a part of a continuum of like, okay, word, it's like my grandma's job to go really light. Like there's no point, she can't come out hard. So she's going to go really light so that my mom can go a little harder so that I can show up in this space and be like, we got to figure out this film so that like, one of my grandkids' friends can like lead the next protest to like shut it all down. Like it's like that time is such a big part of it. And I love that you're saying that about with Haiti, and recognizing the genealogy of the hashtag trauma, so that you know where you are and what level of volume and like saturation that you need to be within your time space for your own resistance and your own mental health. Yeah, I'm gonna ramble. Someone else.
Yeah. Thank you.
One of the things.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Because one of the things that comes to mind, and something I had to learn actually working in Ferguson, is thinking about mental health is coming to understand the community norms, which obviously differ from place to place, time and place and experience, but for some communities, mental illness is the norm. What psychologists would define as mental illness is the norm. And so if that is the norm, it's just sort of placing this conversation in the context of community and understanding community pressures, like you said, Jessica, that have shaped the history and that have led us to this present moment, where we're coming in with the film crew and trying to understand. But I do think sort of understanding the particular pressures on the community and the specific history, and also the mental health, just the overarching themes that are impacting the community, is very, very important.
Right.
And then you're jumping. Go ahead, Yolo.
Okay. I just want to, but I want to make sure I get your comment because I'm sure it's brilliant because you all are brilliant. But I just want to make sure I move us along as well. I just want to lift up and name and summarize it, like the importance of acknowledging that the structural racism, transphobia, homophobia, misogynoir, capitalism all influence what we call mental health, and the mental health and state of our communities is so important. And I lyric the piece that you shared as well. I think about it. One time I was doing workshops with in Black communities. And I was talking about depression, and one of the students said, "I didn't know this was depression. I thought it was just being Black." And it's like lifting up what you talked about in that piece, right? So they're really important. Moving on to the next question, I want to just keep us going because I see we've spent a lot of time on this one, which meant there was a lot in there, and I love that. I want to make sure because we had some good questions you all came up together. And one of the questions I want to ask is that we're talking about filmmaking, right? This capitalistic endeavor that often can be rushed under really increased timelines, and you all are producing films with some very sensitive subject matter that brings up a variety of things that activate folks, right? So I'm curious to know from you all a little bit about what are strategies or things that you are learning how to do to support yourself as you're navigating, to support the people in the production as they are holding and witnessing and being a part of these experiences. What are some of the things you're learning and doing for yourselves and for your communities that you are also working?
If I can say, I remember. I'm just gonna say that upfront, because I remember when I was filming the documentary, one of them, it was extremely important for me to film my mother, and she was living in Florida at the time, so I went to Florida to talk to her. And since I was really scared that she would not want to talk to anyone, I decided to learn how to use the camera and see if I could film her. But the thing is that I was pregnant at the time, so I could not even manage to, carry the camera and film her. So it was kind of difficult, awkward. So at some point I said to her, at some point we managed, at some point I see that she could not talk to me at all, Just to put it in perspective, my mom is declared to be schizophrenia. Is that the word in English? And all types of other stuff, paranoia and stuff like that. So that's what they declare. And then, so I was trying to talk to her. She could not talk. And I said to her, so when are we going to be able to have that talk? And she said, maybe in a year. So I was in the middle of production, and my producer, I called him and I said, well, we're going to have to wait another year to make that film because this is not happening. And then just the fact that he could easily understand that and say, well, if it's what needs to happen, then it's going to happen, because I cannot film her without her knowing and understanding what's going on, and what she's giving to me and to anyone that will watch this film. So we waited a year and a half. And when I came back, the universe literally aligned. We were alone for the first time in the house together. It was only me and a very small crew. And then it happened. We talked for like a week, like we've never talked in our lives together. And then at the end, she was giving me so much that at some point I even had to protect her from giving me, because I think she felt like she was such in a safe place that she could, pull out things that she was never able to share with anyone, even her kids. I mean, including me, of course. And I said, why did you give it? Did you give that to me? And she said, well, you've worked so hard. I think if the only thing I can give to you is the story, then I'm going to give it. So that alone made me realize that she understood what was being done. And she, with her heart, not because, I'm a daughter or whatever, she with her heart gave it. And it's hard to imagine that because it's not in all production that you can let go and follow and but I had this opportunity during this time to do it that way and to wait. And so I'm curious to listen if you guys were forced to do something a certain way that you had to. Yeah.
Oh, Lyric, I think you're on mute.
Yes, I love that of sort of waiting for the year to do the interview with your mom and sort of taking the space and creating the conditions where she felt comfortable. And I too have sort of been in that situation where, documentary is very unique in that I do feel like people are waiting to tell their story and they're just sort of waiting for the opportune conditions. But oftentimes when you're dealing with people who have experienced traumatic events, it's like that interview with your mom. I often fear that moment because I have had a space where someone, had waited to tell their story. It was right under the surface, and then they had a complete breakdown, right? Like like heaving tears. And this actually impacted the crew. Like I did an interview. It was related to, I was working on a project about R. Kelly, and it was like a mom whose daughter had not, she hadn't seen her daughter in nearly 2 years. And she just saw her daughter in the media reports. And she hadn't gone to therapy. She'd sort of been burying this experience, but she wanted to talk about it. And it's almost like, but when it came out, it was like a torrent that I wasn't necessarily prepared for and that the crew wasn't necessarily prepared for. So it's just, thinking about, I don't have a clear answer to this day, but thinking about how to better deal with that situation. And I often work as a director for hire, meaning like, not necessarily my own project, but a project that I'm sort of stepping into that has a schedule, that has a plan, that has sort of all these things in place. And often the mental health concerns for how to create conditions of safety, for how to allow someone to safely be vulnerable and close that space out, right? Because often there's more shooting that needs to be done. And the protagonist or the person that just went through this cathartic expression, like how do you close that out? Anticipating future shoots or anticipating other work that you need to do with this person. And it ultimately conflicts sometimes with, for instance, I've often made the request, if I know like a very vulnerable moment is coming or I'm asking someone to delve into deep trauma because I'm not a therapist, because I'm not trained, as a psychological professional, I have no medical qualifications. I often ask for a therapist to be present. And in that, I run up against sort of the production company who says, well, we can't, for legal reasons, we can't provide care to protagonists. So these are things I'm still grappling with as a filmmaker to try to figure out how do you provide sort of a safe space, and then once that information comes, right, how do you hold it as a director, as a crew, and then how do you present it if you're working as a work for hire to the production company, someone who wasn't there during the shoot, who will review the footage, and oftentimes that review is like, oh my god, this person's crying, this is great, and without understanding sort of the emotional context or the political context that created the material.
Absolutely. Very well said. So many salient points. Nicole, are you speaking?
Yes, sorry, I had my thing on mute. But I love that last part that you said, because it does point out and contextualize all of this as, like, at the end of the day, these are products. Like, the art form in and of itself becomes quite literally objectified, right? Like, this is a thing to sell. Like, my talent is a thing to sell. And so it's like, how do you even process like these extremely real emotions and things that happen, and how to treat that with care and sacredness when, like, that way over here it's going to be like, what's the correct font to market this person crying right now? Like, it's like, whoa, what? Like, that's where we're at. And it's, again, it's like, I feel like it comes down to, like, recognizing the time and space that you're in and making sure that you're at least pushing the needle in the right direction. to be in a space where like I'm so excited for next generations to like laugh hysterically about how ridiculous that sounds. You know what I mean? Like I'm so excited for next generations to be like, wait, you guys didn't have on-set therapists? Oh my gosh. Like how embarrassing. Like that's so like I'm so excited for that, you know, and it's because of conversations like this. And I don't I'm, you know, was one of the producers, but I know our director, Chris Kuhunahana, was really something that I give him so much credit for is he's always really good at knowing what he doesn't know. And I think that that's such a good trait to have as a director. Because anytime I think that if you have the humility and self-awareness to know what you don't know and pass it off and tag in a different team member of with our protagonist who's a female and literally dealing with a ton of the issues that the film touches on. It was like this microcosm of like the film, how I'm like somebody could do a documentary of us making the narrative film. Like it was like the issues were happening on like because this is the space that we're in. But one thing that I really liked that he would do on set was food and food, space, and clothes were very much so used as ways to ritualistically turn off and turn on things. And these were things that created this sort of environment and visual cues even for the other actors and even crew members to understand when you can be that has ended, you can now get in your car and drive safely because like you took that costume off. Like we all shared a meal, everyone here is safe, like, and it was really important. And I think those sorts of rituals are things that help, at least in terms of on set. I mean, I'm production side or producer side, so it's I wasn't on set a lot, but I know that that's something that a lot of the talent speak to. They were like, that was huge to know and have that expectation, no matter how gnarly today was. We will have a meal at the end of this, even if I can't eat it because I'm crying still. We'll still all have a meal. We'll still all end. Out of those sorts of things helped.
Yeah. I think a couple of things. One, for me, I think what's really sort of important as we think about how do we reduce harm or how do we encourage safe space is really being also just self-aware of the actual trauma that we bring to the space, because that's basically what we can control to a certain extent. And I think that helps in terms of providing the environment that's needed and understanding that baggage. I think and for me, part of what was really therapeutic for me in the theater, because I see filmmaking, at least independent film, I work on as therapy themselves for my own pain, which of course reverberates because there are a lot of common lived experiences. But the fact that I went through a film over a number of years with American Promise, where the camera was actually turned on me and I was actually forced to sort of self-reflect on a lot of things, I think that led to a level of sort of at least grappling with trauma and the self-awareness of what am I bringing in that's causing that could cause harm, and how do I navigate around that, be aware of it and know that I'm in work in progress, and then give the space for others to sort of kind of think about that as well. So in some cases, even just with crew, it's just about regrouping at the end of a day, trying to allow for some space for that. And then the trust building, I know we talk a lot about that in documentary. Documentary for me is inherently extractive, and I'm actually trying, certainly observational, I feel is, I'm sort of moving away from that because of those dynamics. And I don't care if I'm from the community or not from the community, there's still that, extractive element of it, just as individual, and how do you push up against that. But and then I just lost my train of thought. But yes, So this idea of what am I bringing in terms of intergenerational trauma or other for myself. So that is what I control in terms of the dynamics and trying to allow for space for that to happen, at least certainly within the crew. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jessica. You got something on your? I see thought clouds. Are you saying something you want to share with us?
Me, I'm just absorbing everything because it feels good actually. I feel like I'm in the panel, but I'm also outside looking at, amazing people saying
Like you're
stuff.
in the choir, like the preacher. You're preaching because you're a part of this collective, but also you feel like you're witnessing and hearing it and getting therapy, the
Yes,
healing from it, right? That's what I feel
yes,
like as well. So
it
much
feels good.
brilliance that you all are bringing into the space. I want to move. I want to move to the next question, but one piece I want to lift up is what Nicole lifted up about the power of ritual. What I hear you saying, the power of ritual. I want to bring that up, highlight that as a theme that came up. And as we talk about the power of ritual, talking about the potential of therapists, and maybe not even just therapists, other types of healers, and being able to be on set and in space, right? So when we talk about decolonizing mental health, thinking about other strategies, whether it means indigenous healers, whether it's like other practitioners, being in the space is so powerful. I also want to lift up what Michèle says, and it kind of leads to our next question about the reality that you all as creators are cultivating and conjuring and bringing in this artistic endeavor, these projects, right? And it has an impact on you all as well, right? That you're also navigating your own journey around healing and wellness, or whatever that looks like, right? And so, really curious to know, kind of building on what Michèle said a little bit, what are some practices or things that you are learning about that intersection, or about what practices you're doing to take care of yourselves and as you are creating? What have you been learning and doing, and maybe even failing at, right? Because we also fail at it. People always like, "What are you doing great?" I'm like, "This is what I'm not doing great today." But let me tell you, maybe you can help me some insight on it, okay? Because it is a very laborious work to do that you all, as creators, that you all help make happen. So, love to kind of talk a little bit more about that for folks who be interested.
I mean, I don't feel like it's something that I'm really good at protecting myself, because I always feel like if I think too much about protection, I'm not diving. And every time I approach something, I literally feel like I'm jumping from a 200-story building, and that I literally have to accept that I'm gonna do it without protection. Um, but it doesn't mean that it goes to a point of self-harm necessarily. It doesn't mean that it goes to a point where it's not in the violence of things. It's more in the how do I bring myself to what I'm dealing, because like Michèle said at the beginning, it's literally a therapy. And I mean, you can't, I mean, we all know that with whoever you're doing this therapy, if you go halfway, then it's going to work halfway. So the question is, how far you can go, and what are the tools that you have to go that far. And, while you are trying to really go deep in what you're doing, but are you also arming yourself? And I'm not saying arming because what it is like a fight in a way, because you're fighting with so many things inside of you that are, so many contradictions, so many thoughts that you have. First of all, let me just name one, just the fact to talk about yourself, to expose yourself. It's something culturally that we, I mean, in my country, let me say that, just to make sure that I don't say something bad, we are not used to it. We're not used to talk about us. And I remember when I was showing the film, it was one of the things where people were like, oh, sometimes I even say, do they even, is it the film, or is it the fact that I expose so much that make them feel like this is big, because it's coming from the place where they are, where they are not used to having those conversations where you're looking at yourself and also looking at others, but with like complete vulnerability, and not only in front of the person, but you're filming it and you're gonna show it. And And the thing is, like, it's this balance of hopefully a lot of people will see it, but also, oh my God, a lot of people will see it. It's are you ready for that? Can you handle that? And I realized that, but at some point you gotta jump. And if you do it with the right people, including production, including people that you invite to exist in that film, with the words that they're gonna share, or with the experience that they're gonna share, or with just the moment, with just them being there that they're gonna share. If you are in the truth of creating that environment where everybody is aware, and everybody is aware of what they're giving and how far we want to go with that, I think it's already safe to say that it's not too far then, because it's always about awareness. Are we aware of what we're giving? And are we aware if we have, to conclude, the tools to give that, and the tools also to receive whatever's coming, after that. And yeah, I'm just gonna stop there a little bit.
I'm gonna yes, and I'm calling response. Southerners. I'm like, yes, Lord. I want to like have a church organ in here. So like that's a part of my cultural tradition. So like, but yes, to everything you said, felt it, testifying, appreciating it, and like just the realness of the nuances of the vulnerability. And I think that like one piece as you were sharing is what Michèle shared a little earlier, and also Lyric said, is that even therapy. Yes, it is therapeutic, but also therapy is uncomfortable at points. People like therapy isn't like, healing is always like, oh, this is so great. This is so wonderful all the time. It's actually really uncomfortable, right? So, so just lifting that up. I'd love to hear from other folks on the panel. What are some things that you are navigating in terms of like, as a creator, artist, filmmaker, navigating your own support strategies and care strategies?
Well, I can say, particularly coming out of, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, particularly coming out of this pandemic, like the global uncertainty and like, sort of the fear and the anxiety that has been abundant over this past year, it has changed the nature of the work that I can do. Literally, like I just cannot do certain subjects or work on certain things that, that I used to before, because I think, I just don't want to wake up in the morning amidst everything that I'm going through. It's just a mental health thing for me. I just cannot tell certain stories right now. I don't think I'm equipped emotionally. I don't think I would do justice to that story. So I would say in this past year of like, largely being in the house, I've really been doing a lot of personal interrogation, because I think I'm known for doing hard stories like terrorism, sexual abuse. But I had to really probe, why are you going for those stories? There's stories of bubble blowing and butterflies, and so doing this interrogation of why, how do I see myself reflected in this story? Does this story need to be told? Am I emotionally equipped to tell this story? Do I have the capacity to do this long term? Do I have the capacity to rewatch this material over and over? Does that make sense? So I had never, as crazy as that sounds, I had never considered that question of, do I enjoy this? Do I have the capacity? I just kind of started, like I assessed the story. I assessed the people in the story, but I didn't assess, if I had the capacity, if I was grounded. So going back to what you said, Michèle, and what you're bringing, sometimes it wasn't good, right? Because if I'm ungrounded and I haven't closed out of something heavy that I have heard or experienced or just haven't fully processed, when I show up the next time, I could easily be an agent of harm, and so it's really been probing these things. And I had to honestly grapple with the fact that, like, no, I am not equipped. Every story is not for me. And I've had to start sort of, passing on things just because I have to admit I don't have the capacity.
Absolutely. And kudos to you as well for that. Like that takes a lot of having boundaries. I'm always like, whenever I hear somebody's like, I established a boundary. I'm like, yes, we need to celebrate that, right? When you're just honoring that, like, I don't have capacity for this. This is not in alignment with where I am right now. Because I know that, like, for me, I've grown up in so many spaces where people don't celebrate that. It's often pushed back against. And I'm always like, let's celebrate each other when we honor and honor wherever we are, just lifting that up. So thank you for sharing that. Absolutely. Anyone else want to share? Nicole, Michèle, want to share about this?
I love that you. Oh, sorry. Go.
No, go ahead.
No, go. I mean, in addition to Puerto Rican and Hawaiian, I'm also Korean. So the Asian will not allow from it. Like, I'm gonna keep doing it. Go. No, you. Like, you gotta go. I'm gonna keep. I'm not gonna. I'm just gonna keep being like you. Like, it won't stop. I'll be on mute, still doing it. Like, you go.
Okay. All right. No, I think it's sort of circling back to sort of what was mentioned earlier. I think for me, the response sort of from this last year, but also the response to the individualistic nature and egocentric nature of even mental health and healing is community. I think the pandemic for me, if it weren't for my extended family and my community of brothers and sisters in this field that I could call at any moment or discuss whatever, has been kind of the rock. And I think the response to the individualism has got to be community and collaborative work, and sort of investing in what does collaborative work look like, knowing that it can be messy. And so kind of leaned into that, and seek for nourishment in community as a response to this, extractive nature, even of, the mental health industry.
All right, now y'all with this word in here today. All y'all got this word. Yes, preaching. Yes. Nicole, you want to share some things now?
I'm like still even processing what is so true, and it's so I love the way that you guys phrase everything. Lyric, I love that. That's such it's such a beautiful conversation to be a part of, and so encouraging. And I love being able to have tangible references to remind myself of publicly stating like that's not for me, or that's better. So, like, those are such amazing examples for. I'm so grateful for you doing that, because it's so true. And I think that a lot of trauma is created in a space that could have easily not existed had not people just had that simple, oh, this one's not mine. Like, I'll support whoever, like, right on, I'll support. Or it's like how much time gets saved, how much money. I mean, producer brain, I'm like, can you like, no, let's not shoot today. Like, if this is gonna be garbage and then I'm gonna have to pay for more days of it, like, no, take a break, please. I'd way rather you take a break and I only have to account for this than try to repay for the week it took for take after take after take after take after take, because nobody, it's on multiple levels. Even when you're dealing with the garbage capitalist space or a Western mental health space, across the board, being able to be okay with not being okay is extremely helpful. And I love that you did that, because that the inability to recognize that, I think, is where a lot of the issues stem from, is when people are not able to pass it off, or not able to be okay with not knowing, and the insecurity and ego and like faux confidence and all of those things that rise up. Again, as Michèle, as you're saying, it's all very individualistic. And when the self, I mean, not to get too religious or mystical or whatever, but it's like that idea is toxic. It's crazy toxic. And it even leads to spaces of like those, when you are doing like protection, that's like hurting everyone around you, though. I'm protecting myself. It's like, oh, you're also hurting everyone here. Like, please protect yourself in a different way. But that idea of community extending as well to plants and animals. I mean, not to overly insert, Hawaiianness into this space, but just, that's what I can speak to, is I do think that it is important to, and again, this is something that would be considered mentally unhealthy, right? But community absolutely also includes the winds and the rains and the trees and the rocks of the space that you're in. And a lot of times that absolutely is all you got, you know? And if you allow yourself to dive so deep in that your in becomes your out, and you absolutely are hearing from your ancestors in the wind and the ocean and all of that, like that is your community. And I think that that's important to just, as long as you can recognize yourself in the context of the multiverse and everything, like isolation becomes like irrelevant, right? It's like, what? No, I'm this chair, I'm this rock, I'm this, like whatever. Like I'm fine, you know, because I'm small, because I'm big. I mean, not to get too esoteric out there, but yeah.
Let me also say, please do not apologize for bringing your full self, your spiritual perspective, your light into the space. This is what the conversation is about, right? We're trying to get the decolonized white shit. We're trying to get that out of here. I'm not sure if I can curse. I'm so sorry. We're trying to get that out of here. We're trying to bring some other stuff in here, okay? So you do not have to apologize. I want to. We have about 9 minutes left, and I want to make sure that people who are watching, if you have some questions, please send them in the chat. Right now, we don't have any, but if you have any questions, please send them, and I would love to present them to our esteemed panelists. We've had so many amazing topics and nuggets and gold pieces to kind of take with us. Any other thoughts that are kind of circling for you all about this conversation as we're waiting on questions to come?
The will, the capacity to choose yourself, it's something that is, I mean, I've been listening to you guys saying it, and it's so hard. It's so hard when, you know, for example, here, it's because of money issue, because of so many issues, you're constantly being dragged, whether by family members or by your community, because most of the time they feel like we have to be in the struggle together, or or there's a panic attack, because otherwise, if you put yourself out and say, I need this space, a matter of space in Haiti or in my community, it's like, what do you need space for? I mean, if I would say that to my mother, she would be like, what's wrong with you? Like it will be almost like an insult, she would be like, oh, so offended. So growing up, I'm like, okay, I need space for myself. And it's like something, even when I say it, I almost feel like I'm betraying something, like I'm doing something so wrong, so deeply wrong. And sometimes, it feels like it's something that you can say, easily. I need space for myself. I need to resource. I need to find this energy that you're asking me for, because when you constantly take it from me, where do you want me to get it? And when they don't take just a piece, they just take everything, because we have no control of what we can take from people and how much is the right amount, to take from people. So when you find yourself dealing with, all this, and then feeling the necessity to isolate, I'm there for you, but also I'm not there. It's sometimes it's not even something that you allow yourself to even think. And I'm saying this because whether you above your work, you choose you choose yourself. It's everything that you guys said about how to choose yourself, and it's something that I need to think about. I'm constantly thinking about, and constantly finding ways to not feel guilty. Because if you choose yourself and you feel guilty on top of it, I mean, it's as harmful as being in a space that you don't want to be. So it's choosing self and be at peace with that choice, and then do the work that needs to be done, and come when without carrying the guilt all over the place with you, and not being able to disconnect and fully be in the moment that you choose to be. Yeah, you have a bunch.
I also think you choose your community, right? There is the community that you are a part of that sometimes is overburdened because they're asking everything of you. And that is, of course, it has to do with all kinds of dynamics, but there's also the community you choose. And the community you choose is that space that will allow you to understand that you need that space now, but also you understand when they need that space too. So there's, I think, a way of sort of choosing a smaller community, or however, where there is sort of that mutual support, mutual aid.
Interject you all. We have a couple of questions from the audience. I just want to kind of try to get one or two of them in. First one we have is about mental health first aid, and asks if mental health first aid training is being looked at as a tool for yourselves that you've used it for in the past. Is anybody familiar with mental health first aid, or has there been a tool that you've all thought about using?
I've requested mental health resources, but none. I would say, the industry is not ripe with these things. So I would love to explore this further, but no, it has never been. I've never heard of this resource in particular.
So for folks who know, mental health first aid is created by the National Council of Behavioral Health. It's really designed for actually prison guards, I believe, and like people who worked in I think prisons and other kind of institutions to help them kind of respond to mental health crisis. A little bit of a plug here. It's very it's a very white mental health approach. We have a program at Beam called Black Mental Health and Healing Justice, which is a response to that, which really focuses on the healing justice lineage and indigenous and other ways of healing modalities. So check us out. Just a little bit of plug there as an opportunity if you're really thinking about how you can support healing capacity in communities. I have another question that says, can somebody speak again to the significance of ritual and power? People really love that part where we talked about ritual and power on the set. Any thoughts around that piece that you all wanted to share there?
I think Nicole said that. Yeah.
Yeah, we that was something that the ritual was a big deal on set, even in terms of a lot of that came from, at the time I was on the board of the Domestic Violence Action Center in Hawaii, and a lot of in the same way that the brain gets programmed with repetition from abusive spaces, it can also be comforted, and you know what I mean? Like, you can use the same tools for like evil or good, right? Not that those are the only two binaries that exist, but the rituals and the I know, like, for example, our lead actress, having the blue dress on versus having the blue dress off was a very big deal for her. And having the time to go in hair and makeup and have this character exist, and being able to separate for herself, yes, I'm pulling on these emotions and these memories and like processing them, and then it comes out as this for this character. All of that cannot even happen unless I'm wearing this blue dress. And our director having those conversations and having a lot of time with her outside of even before filming, he did a lot of talking with her and having very real conversations to find out those things of like, yo, do you have a support system at home? What is it like for you after when you leave set? Like, what is this like for you? Like, do we need to take more time? There was a lot of, as a producer, there was a lot of me like faking doctor's notes to like her other job, be like, no, just sleep, just stay home. So like, that was rough yesterday. Like, just take a nap tomorrow. But the ritualistic, those are things that also create community, right? Even when they're not real, like even if they're invented, like what even makes a ritual a ritual? Like, where does the happy birthday song come from? Like, all of these things are just created. They're like, none of these things are real anyway. And so creating rituals that equal things and hacking your own system to make sure that you and the space that you're in can all be in the same space of health. A ritual is definitely a good tool for that.
So we have 1 minute left. We've had a powerful conversation. I know people are like, wait, what? It's been an hour, an amazing conversation. It went back really fast. I was like, wait, until I looked at my calendar, looked at my clock to catch that. I want to thank each of our panelists. There have been so many themes, and I want to just throw out some of the themes that we've taken away from this powerful conversation, which I feel like we could go on for another hour easily and not even blink. I want to affirm, like, lifting up the importance of taking your time when mom says we will talk to you next year, we got to honor that process, right? That's a part of this piece. I want to honor the piece around honoring our own boundaries and capacity, knowing the lyric lifted up, saying that, hey, actually, I don't have to do this. Why am I doing this? I don't have the capacity for this right now, right? Thinking about what Michèle brought into the space, really honoring that, the state of our communities is directly linked to the historical context of harm, of colonialism, of all these different pieces. So when we talk about mental health and mental illness in this Western concept, we have to really be clear about that both the pathology system and the conditions have been created by these systems, right? So acknowledging that. Thinking about Nicole, bringing in the pieces about ritual into your set. Thinking also in lyric of the piece about thinking about therapists on your set, maybe other kinds of healers. Thinking about how you bring your full spirituality into the space to help people process and disconnect and cut off all those pieces. Really critical, as well as cultivating your own wellness journey, which everyone really brilliantly shared. Even when you have to be honest with yourself that maybe I'm not even sure where I am on my journey. That's a part of the process, right? So just honoring wherever we are. So many themes, so much brilliance. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to have this conversation. For all those watching, thank you for being present with us. Thank you, each of you, again, for your time, to BlackStar, to everyone who made this possible. Make sure you follow all these brilliant folks on social media. You can find it on the website. Watch their films, support healing, support decolonization. Let's get free and make some beautiful art. Thank y'all so much.